FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is September 25th, 2017. Well, you're probably aware of a lot of mishaps that have happened with American naval ships recently. Lots of rumors circulating from aliens taking control, something to do with Area 51, to hacks, to other inexplicable factors. But let's get to the bottom of it. Seth Cropsey is with us now. Seth, you are Director, Center for American Seapower, long experience, assistant to the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, and a lot of other positions with the military, with Navy, NATO. So we're really happy that you're here with us. And before we get started, hey, if you got any questions or comments for myself or Seth, just email us at kl@kerrylutz.com. Don't forget, sign up for our newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Terry. I'm glad to be here.
So we had like 2 destroyers get involved in major accidents, they were fatal accidents, and really put these ships out of commission. And of course, the conspiracy theorist in me is saying, well, there's something to this. One I could see, but 2 ships in a couple of weeks. How does that happen?
The Navy is experiencing a gap between what's expected of it by the nation and the number of ships that it has to supply those requirements. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing the results of that gap right now. We forward deploy ships to Japan, so they're based in Japan, and the advantage there is that they don't have to travel back and forth across the Pacific to get to where they're going. Mm-hmm. The disadvantage is that their operational schedule, while they're based in Japan, is very high because of all the things that you know are going on in the West Pacific right now. Korea is the best known, but we shouldn't forget about China and the South China Sea and the threats to Japan, which is an ally of ours. So those ships are being run constantly. And the sailors on them are working up to 100 hours per week. And in order to keep ships at that tempo of operations, Navy has sort of allowed certification requirements to be waived or reduced. And in fact, the number of ships that have not been certified or whose certifications have run out has increased dramatically over the past year. And I think that will be found to be a contributing factor, an important contributing factor to what we've seen in June and August, the collisions that you were referring to.
Yeah, and certification, Seth, when you've got ships, military, in the Navy, what do they have to do to get certified and stay certified?
Well, they have to go through a fairly long list to see whether to determine that their training and readiness for operations is fully up to speed. So that means everything from whether the fire control people know their jobs to the watchstanders to all the divisions aboard a ship that are responsible, engineering and so on and so forth, for the safe operation of a ship. And it's an important measurement of whether a ship and the crew are sufficiently trained and ready to go.
So, I think what you're saying here is, what we know is in any operation, one of the core functions of the operation is to make sure that the staff, in this case the sailors, are basically continuing with their training. You got to have constant training because, for one thing, nothing's happening most of the time or a lot of the time, although recently not so much. But you tend to get rusty, just like in a Broadway production. They keep practicing and rehearsing.
Or your family doctor.
Yeah,
they have to stay proficient too. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas being a pundit, you don't have to know anything. You could just be an armchair quarterback. But in this case, you're just observing what's already there, right?
Yeah. No, it's a serious issue. I mean, and it really goes back to the question of the point that I raised initially, and that is that there's just a large gulf between the requirements that the nation places on the Navy for ships, and the number of ships that the Navy has available. To give you some idea of that, when the Cold War ended, the fleet size was just shy of 600 ships. Today it's 276, so less than half of that. And the requirements for Navy ships have been accelerating rapidly since 2001. Right. So it's a situation that has reached the tipping point.
So what is the solution here? Right, we deal with solutions on the show. How do we get back to where we need to be? Do we need to add more ships? It seems like an obvious.
We need a larger fleet. We need to spend more money. We need to improve the Navy's ability to do its job, which is to keep crises at a distance from the United States. And that can't be done without increasing the size of the fleet and adding more ships more quickly than we've been accustomed to doing in the past 20 years.
Yeah. So is that going to happen here under the Trump administration? Is this in the cards or what?
Well, I don't know. The president has set a target of 350 ship Navy, but it's important to remember that target is a 30-year target. I think that we need to move more quickly than that. The shipbuilding budget of the Navy is around $15 billion a year. I think that at a minimum it should be doubled. Doubled,
really? Wow. So,
in the Reagan administration, for example, when Reagan took over from Carter, the number of ships that were being built per year was in the single digits, and the Reagan budgets increased to the double digits. Yeah. Those ships have seen over 30 years or more of service and are aging. The fleet has gotten smaller. We should increase the budget so that we would be turning out ships in the double digits per year.
Right. And how long is it going to take to do that, though?
Well, that depends upon look, we have the defense industrial base to do that. Mm-hmm. So it's not a question of starting from the ground up. It's really a question of political will of the presidents, of Congresses, and most important, of the American people. And that's why I wrote this book, which is because I don't think that most of us are aware of the situation that the Navy finds itself in today. And most of us assume that everything's just fine because we've had a powerful Navy since even before World War II. But everything is not fine, and that's what sea blindness addresses, and that's why I wrote the book.
So, you think the situation is salvageable here, or are we just in a steady decline with no hope or anything?
Yeah, Terry, if I thought that the situation was not salvageable, I would not write the book. And let me tell you why. Because every other great sea power that has forgotten, that has become sea blind, that has failed to understand the connection between sea power and its economic health and security, all of the powers that have forgotten that, none of them have recovered. So if I thought that we were simply sentenced to a declining fleet and that there was no recourse and no way of resolving the problem, I wouldn't write this book.
I gotcha. So the situation is serious, but it's not desperate yet.
That's correct. That's my opinion.
What's our time frame here to actually get our act together?
I think 10 years is a reasonable time. The Navy shipbuilding moves slower than increases in the other services because ships are bigger, they cost more, they take more time to design and to build and test. It's not like a tank or a Humvee or an airplane, which you can turn around relatively quicker. Not so much airplanes because they take a while to design and they're more complicated today. But generally speaking, ships take much longer to build than almost anything else. Yeah,
for sure. What about some of the ships that we have built, which is, a basic, like the Littoral combat ships? Some of them seem to be really substandard and not up to the task.
Well, the Littoral combat ship was designed when the focus of seapower was different than it is today, and when terrorism looked as though it was the largest single threat facing the nation. And the idea of the Littoral combat ship was in large measure to be able to partner with smaller navies around the world and help those states with smaller navies to avoid becoming failed states. But in the intervening time between the design of that ship and today, China, for example, has become a significant naval power. Russia is recovering its naval power. We have aircraft carriers that are dedicated to fighting terrorists in the Middle East and from Afghanistan to Syria and Iraq. And so the picture of the threat itself has changed. And that makes partnering with smaller navies less important than being able to defend against larger navies and being able to go in harm's way as a result of changed circumstances. So that's why former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel wanted to and directed that the defenses for the Littoral combat ship be increased substantially. And that's one of the things that's happening right now that will make it a more capable ship. But I still think that we need an even more capable ship and more of them to carry out the missions of the Navy.
Right. So there's a lot to take in here. There's a lot of things that need to be done, and obviously policy starts from the top down. And Trump has talked about reviving the armed forces. What do you figure his odds of success are?
It's completely up to the president. If he makes this a priority and says that he wants it done and works together with Congress, he certainly has the votes. But it's one of several things that he wants to do and that he pledged to do in the campaign, and the administration and the president have to decide what their priorities are. I hope that he said a lot of good things about the military, and he obviously respects their achievements and their professionalism. But I can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess none of us can. And so what you're really detailing here is kind of a long-term pattern of neglect towards our Navy, and it's going to require a lot of money and effort to reclaim its capabilities, I guess.
That's what it will take, and that's what the question before. That's one of the large questions before the American people today. Do we still have the will? And that I hope that people will read my book and say we need to find the will.
All right. Well, where there's a will, there's a lawyer, as they say, and that's all too often the problem. But yeah, I guess we need to be aware of this first and foremost, awareness of the problem before you can begin to even think about addressing it.
Exactly.
So we want to find out more about you, Seth, and go to your website, read your writing. Where's the place to go?
Well, I'm a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, www.hudson.org in Washington, and also the director of Hudson Center for American Seapower. And the book is available on Amazon, Amazon.com, and is also available at Barnes & Noble. And if your listeners live in towns and cities where there are any bookstores left, you can probably find it there too.
All right. Well, hey, that is really interesting, and it's basically cutting away the emotion, getting into the actual situation, the facts, which is important. So we'll have a link to Seth's work on our website, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Any questions, comments, email me at kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feed's at Kerry Lutz. Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Seth, appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us, and best of luck to you on your new book.
Thank you for the opportunity, Terry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.